Housing Choice Voucher Briefing Presentation. The Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority Housing Choice Voucher Program administers the Housing Choice Voucher or the Section 8 program in 83 counties throughout the state of Indiana. IHCDA does this through funding through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. Welcome to the video presentation. In its simplest form, IHCDA pays for all or a portion of an eligible family's rent in a suitable housing unit. The keys to receiving this rental assistance are understanding how the HCV program works, what your responsibilities are, and how to find suitable housing that you can afford in a good location. This presentation will outline general program requirements within several topic segments. You can ask specific questions at the end of this video when you have an opportunity to speak with your Housing Choice Voucher specialist. When you have an opportunity to speak with your Housing Choice Voucher specialist, at that time you will discuss your income, household composition, and sign your required paperwork in order to receive your Housing Choice Voucher. As discussed prior, IHCDA works with local subcontracting agencies. Those partners are listed with the counties that they participate in on this slide. Phone numbers are also provided for your Housing Choice Voucher local subcontracting agency. Since you are participating in this briefing, your information you already provided shows you meet HUD's definition of a family, and your total household income and assets falls within the acceptable limits for the number of people that will be living with you. Throughout this presentation, and through speaking with your HCV specialist, you will learn all the keys necessary to participate in the Housing Choice Voucher program. There is a lot of information to learn, so pay close attention and be sure to write down any questions to ask your Housing Choice Voucher specialist at the end of this presentation. The keys to finding a good home that starts at the beginning, and that beginning starts with understanding the program requirements, your briefing packet. You've already been mailed a briefing packet that includes many of the documents that will be discussed here today. In order to continue to receive assistance, you are required to sign and return documents back to your Housing Choice Voucher specialist. Once those documents are signed and provided to the Housing Choice Voucher specialist, they will provide a signed copy of your Housing Choice Voucher back to you. At that point, you will be then able to search for suitable housing. When you sign your name, you are stating that you understand the program and agree to follow all of the IHCDA policies and procedures that are required to participate in the Housing Choice Voucher program. We will ask you to sign a briefing checklist that indicates that you have received or have been explained all of the items that are in the briefing packet. These items include the Housing Choice Voucher itself, the request for tenancy approval, the tenancy addendum, the booklet, A Good Place to Live, the pamphlet on protecting your family from lead-based paint in your home, the EIV brochure, fair housing complaint form, your right to appeal, an overview of the family rights and obligations, information on fraud, waste, and abuse, the Violence Against Women's Act forms, information on portability, and housing search resources. Understanding your voucher. The Housing Choice Voucher is generally good for a period of 60 days from the date it is issued. You must submit a request for tenancy approval form or an RFTA with a copy of the proposed lease within the time of the voucher. Only one RFTA form may be submitted at a time. Once the RFTA form is submitted, the time on your voucher is suspended until the Housing Choice Voucher Specialist and the Housing Choice Voucher Inspector is able to determine if the unit meets the criteria to be eligible for subsidy. IHCDA has a minimum rent requirement, meaning that a family must pay, at minimum, $50 towards their tenant portion of the rent. If this provision impacts you directly, at the end of this presentation, please speak with your Housing Choice Voucher Specialist. The Housing Choice Voucher is your key to assistance. You will be asked to sign your Housing Choice Voucher. Once signed and returned to your Housing Choice Voucher Specialist, you will be provided with a signed copy. It is critical that you read all of the HCV documents that have been given to you today. It is critical that you read your voucher carefully as it outlines important roles and responsibilities of a participant in the Housing Choice Voucher program. A landlord may request to see a signed copy of your Housing Choice Voucher to confirm that you are a participant eligible for the subsidy in the program. The HCV program is a privilege that does come with great responsibility. You may be denied or terminated if certain policies or procedures are not followed. This information on policies and procedures and grounds for denial or termination will be discussed in detail further in this presentation. Whether you have found a new unit to rent or you wish to use your voucher in a current unit that you are residing in, the request for tenancy approval form must be submitted to the Housing Choice Voucher Specialist. This form details the amount of the unit's rent, the type of the unit that will be rented, the utilities provided in the unit, and who is responsible for those utilities, as well as any other specific information that identifies this unit and allows the Housing Choice Voucher Specialist to determine rent reasonableness or comparability to other units similarly in the area. This document also must be accompanied by a proposed lease for the unit in which the participant chooses to reside. Only one RFTA may be submitted at a time. Once an RFTA is submitted, the Housing Choice Voucher Specialist will stop the clock on any of the days left on the voucher in order to ensure that no time is wasted while the Housing Choice Voucher Specialist determines if the unit meets the criteria to be leased. If the Housing Choice Voucher Specialist determines that the unit meets all required criteria for it to be entered into a subsidy, the tenant and the landlord shall enter into a lease. This is a legally binding contract between the tenant and the landlord. IHCDA nor our partners are party to the lease. IHCDA enters into a housing assistance payment contract in which IHCDA or our local subcontracting agencies agree to subsidize the unit for a portion or all of the rent required. IHCDA does require the lease to include an additional document, the tenancy addendum, which is an extra protection for both the tenants and the landlords and complements the Housing Choice Voucher participants' lease. As seen here, the tenancy addendum is an additional document that outlines specifics about the program and outlines who is responsible for fees, charges, contract rent, and rent to owner. This document includes critical information for both the landlord and the tenant and outlines all the steps and requirements for the tenant to continue to receive funding through the Housing Choice Voucher program. Additional items included in your Housing Choice Voucher briefing packet include HUD forms, such as a good place to live, information on hazards of lead-based paint, information on fraud, waste, and abuse, documentation on housing discrimination. Your Housing Choice Voucher specialist will provide you with a list of landlords who may accept the Housing Choice Voucher, an overview of how your tenant rent will be calculated, how to file a complaint, request an informal review, informal hearing, or to report issues to the Office of the Inspector General, tools on areas of opportunity, and finding housing in areas that best meet your needs, information on how utility allowance is applied for your unit, documentation on Violence Against Women's Act protections, and how portability works. Within your briefing packet, HUD provides a document called A Good Place to Live. This document outlines the general requirements that HUD looks for when approving a quality home. This booklet should be used as a tool to identify what the inspector will look for as they go through a unit step by step, room by room. This is a good tool to provide to a potential landlord as it outlines the requirements for housing quality standards. A brochure is included within your Housing Choice Voucher briefing packet that discusses how to protect your family from lead in your home. This packet includes information on ways to eradicate lead, simple steps that can be taken to ensure that you protect your family, especially for those households with children under the age of 6, and ways to identify potential hazards in a home that is built before 1978. This packet provides contact numbers in case there is a potential for lead-based paint exposure within your current unit or a potential unit. An important document within your briefing packet includes the EIV form. This form must be signed and returned back to your Housing Choice Voucher specialist. This document is used by all housing authorities, and it is used to confirm name, date of birth, and social security numbers. It is used to verify any reported income sources and amounts, to confirm your participation in any rental assistance program, and confirm whether or not you owe any outstanding debts to another housing authority. If this form is not signed and returned, you may not be eligible to receive Housing Choice Voucher assistance. Housing discrimination, unfortunately, is still a common practice in a lot of areas. For this reason, HUD provides an Are You a Victim of Housing Discrimination? Fair Housings is Your Right booklet, which is included within your Housing Choice Voucher briefing packet. Within this packet, there is information on how to file a complaint if you feel you are a victim of housing discrimination. Housing discrimination is illegal, and if you feel that you have been discriminated against based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, family status, or due to a disability, HUD wants to ensure that you have all the tools necessary to make them aware of this discrimination. As noted prior, the Housing Choice Voucher Program is a privilege that comes with great responsibilities. This part of the briefing presentation, we will go over the family rights and obligations in detail to ensure that all participants and applicants are fully aware of the requirements to participate and continue to receive assistance, as well as what would deem a denial of assistance or termination. All applicants, family members, and members of their household, as well in some cases guests, are required to participate in the family rights and obligations to ensure the right for peaceful enjoyment for others that live in a similar area. A violation of any family rights and obligations may result in denial or termination from participation in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Certain violations may result in fines and lifelong bans from participation in other government programs. Family rights and obligations are included as one of the documents that you will be provided and required to sign within this briefing packet. At this time, we will go over all of the family rights and obligations to ensure full understanding. Family right and obligation number 1. As a participant, you are required to provide true, complete, and accurate information within 15 days from the date of request or the date of change to the LSA. Failure to do so may result in termination or denial of the program. Examples of providing true and accurate information include providing Social Security cards, birth certificates for household members, providing proof of income changes within 15 days of the date of the known change, providing evidence of receiving a benefit such as temporary assistance to needy families or any type of Social Security award. As a participant or an applicant, you must establish citizenship or legal immigration status for all household members. Failure to do so may result in termination or denial from participation in the program. You are responsible to take care of the assisted unit, including any maintenance of any family responsible utilities, meaning that if you are required to have a utility in your name, if that utility is disconnected, you may be required to have that utility turned back on within 24 hours or risk losing your housing choice voucher. You are required to report any housing quality standard violations to your landlord and your HCV specialist. You must cooperate in all scheduled meetings from your HCV specialist, including interims or annual re-examinations. A requirement to complete and sign all forms, including but not limited to the tenant information form, any authorization forms that require signatures, and all forms related to initial and continued eligibility on the program are mandated. Failure to do so may result in initial program denial or termination from the Housing Choice Voucher Program. You're required to supply any information that the Housing Authority deems to be necessary for all household members, including the submission of birth certificates or verification of birth, Social Security cards or verification of Social Security numbers, and photo IDs for all adult household members. You are required to remain in the initial assisted unit for 12 months of assistance under the HCV program. Thereafter, remain in the unit for the period of time specified in your initial lease. You are required to use the assisted unit only for the purpose of residence. You may not use the unit for a business. You may not sublease the unit or rent it out to others. You must comply with the terms of the lease as they are outlined with the owner. Failure to comply with the lease agreements could be subject to termination from the Housing Choice Voucher program. You are required to report all changes in writing to your LSA caseworker, including changes in household income, assets, household makeup or composition, or other changes in your living conditions to the LSA within 15 calendar days of the occurrence. You are required to cooperate in establishing agreements to repay assistance that was incorrectly paid out on your behalf under any federal housing program. Also, repay assistance as agreed upon with the PHA, meaning that if an eligible family fails to make the Housing Authority aware of an increase in income, and the Housing Authority then finds out of the increase, you may be required to pay back any subsidy that was paid on your behalf erroneously. Failure to pay that portion back once the Housing Authority notifies you could result in termination from the program. As a participant, you agree not to engage in criminal activities or permit anyone, including guests or any other person, to engage in criminal activities. You agree to obtain permission from the PHA and the landlord prior to allowing someone move into your unit. You agree to allow the PHA to inspect your unit at a reasonable time after you have received reasonable notice, and notify the PHA in writing anytime the head of household is going to be absent from the unit for 30 or more consecutive calendar days. You must notify the Housing Authority, the property owner, and landlord in writing at least 30 calendar days prior to terminating your lease or vacating your unit. You must promptly give the PHA a copy of any eviction notice received from the property owner or the landlord. You agree never to sublease, assign, transfer, or rent out rooms in your unit or otherwise re-rent the unit. You also agree not to vacate the unit but use it as a backup if you are staying with other family for an extended period of time. And you agree never, for any reason, to withhold your tenant portion of the rent to the landlord while you are remaining in the Assisted Housing Choice Voucher unit. Failure to pay tenant portion of rent on time to the landlord is grounds for termination from the program. The Housing Authority, also called the PHA, may deny or terminate your housing assistance if an applicant, family, or an assisted family member violates any of the above-mentioned family obligations. Further, if an assisted family member or an applicant family commits fraud, bribery, and/or any other corrupt or criminal act in connection with a federal housing program, or the participants participate in illegal drug activity, especially the use of methamphetamines in a federally funded property, violent activity, abuse of alcohol, and/or any sexual offenses, or pays any money to the property owner, landlord, or agent over and above the amount of the rent, they may be terminated from the program. If you receive HCV program assistance for the unit while receiving other ongoing rental assistance, you may be terminated. If you use the unit for purposes other than a residence, aside from normal wear and tear of the unit, if you cause damages or allow any of your guests to cause damages to the unit, if you allow anyone to move into your unit without the express written prior permission from the housing authority, you may also be terminated from the program. Note that IHCDA defines a guest as anyone not on the lease. A guest can remain in the unit no longer than 30 consecutive days or a total of 90 cumulative calendar days during any 12-month period. However, it's important to note that your lease may have different criteria for allowing others to be in your unit, and therefore you must also comply with your lease. If you rent the unit from a property owner, or a landlord agent who is related to you or any member of your family by blood or marriage, including a wife, husband, parent, a child, grandparent, sister, or brother, unless you receive the express written approval from IHCDA in advance, you may be terminated from the program. At this point, please locate a Housing Choice Voucher Family Rights and Obligations sheet in your briefing packet. Please fill out and sign the form and return it back to your Housing Choice Voucher specialist. Failure to do so may result in denial of participation in the program. As an applicant or a participant in the program, you have certain rights within the program guidelines. If the housing authority sends a denial letter or a notice to terminate titled Transmittal Termination or Denial, the letter or the notice will contain a brief explanation of the reason for your denial of an application for assistance or the reason that you are being terminated from the program. You have 15 calendar days from the date of that letter or notice to request an informal review or an informal hearing. If you disagree with the letter or the notice, your request must be made in writing to the housing authority, and you must state expressly why you are requesting a review or a hearing. At the hearing, you will be provided an opportunity to present any written or oral objections. A hearing officer will notify you of any final decision in writing and provide a brief explanation for the decision. It is important to note that a housing authority is not bound by the decision of a hearing officer if the decision exceeds the authority of that hearing officer, or if the decision is contrary to any of the HUD regulations or federal, state, or local laws. For certain types of decisions, the housing authority is not required to provide an opportunity for an informal review or for an informal hearing. In addition to your rights to an informal review or an informal hearing, you have the right to contact the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for any complaint that you may have against a housing authority. The Indianapolis Field Office has details on their website as well as through their toll-free number to file a complaint. If you'd like to report any cases of fraud, waste, abuse, or serious mismanagement of HUD funds, you may contact the HUD Office of Inspector General. Their hotline information, as well as a form, is included in your briefing packet. The link to their website is also included in this presentation below. Within your briefing packet, HUD has provided a document called Fraud, Applying for HUD Housing Assistance. If you are found guilty of committing fraud, you may be evicted from your apartment, be required to repay all overpaid rental assistance you received, be fined up to $10,000, and be imprisoned up to 5 years. Further, you may be prohibited from receiving any future assistance, and you could also be subject to any state or local government penalties. Fraud in the program takes many forms, and the best way to avoid it is to always make sure you ask questions of any matter that you don't understand to your Housing Choice Vouchers caseworker. Within your briefing packet, you have been provided with the Violence Against Women's Act document. HUD mandates that all housing authorities make participants and applicants aware of the protections offered to tenants on the program. If you are a victim of domestic violence, dating violence, assault, or stalking, and you need protections to allow you to move or to avoid an eviction due to damages to a property caused by a perpetrator, please make your housing choice specialist aware so that they can offer the protections to you and ensure your safety. The VAWA protections are afforded to anyone regardless of gender. One of the unique keys to the Housing Choice Voucher is portability. Portability is essentially referring to the process as to where a family can move their voucher to an area outside of the housing authority's jurisdiction. In order to be eligible to port, you must have completed your first year at your current initial unit. You must also be in good standing with the program rules, and the receiving housing authority must be willing to accept your voucher or be willing to bill the housing authority in which you are coming from. There are certain criteria required within portability that are explained in the portability document included in your briefing packet. If you have any questions regarding this process, please speak with your housing case specialist for more details on how portability works. HUD requires all housing authorities to provide information on areas of opportunity or desirable neighborhood characteristics that provide housing choice voucher participants with access to goods and services, good transportation, good schools, and presence of adult role models. In order to achieve this, IHCDA utilizes the Housing Opportunity Atlas.org website. In this website, which is provided in this briefing video, you may search a specific area to find out socioeconomic details, school information, and neighborhood characteristics that best meet your needs. We recommend using this resource as a tool to aid you in finding units that best meet your family's needs. At the end of this video presentation, you will have an opportunity to chat with your Housing Choice Voucher specialist to determine how your tenant rent is calculated. Briefly, the Housing Choice Voucher takes into consideration fair market rent for an area in which you're choosing to reside, the payment standard which is allowed within that area, and then any allowance for utilities to determine the tenant portion of the rent for that area. The tenant who receives the Housing Choice Voucher can contribute to the rent owed to the landlord. For IHCDA, as previously mentioned, we do enforce a $50 minimum tenant rent. The amount of the tenant rent must contribute to the greater of the following: 30% of their monthly adjusted income, 10% of their monthly gross income, welfare rent, or the minimum rent as previously discussed. When you meet with your housing authority specialist, they will advise of your specific rent that you must pay to your landlord. As discussed in the prior slides, utility allowance is one of the factors used to determine the gross rent for a unit, as well as affordability for a unit. In a few moments, this presentation will end and you will have the opportunity to meet with your Housing Choice Voucher Specialist to determine the utility allowance for the area in which you're choosing to reside. Your Housing Choice Voucher Specialist will provide you with detailed information for the subsidy standard based on your family size and the unit that you are approved for. In the next slide, please make sure to take time to write down any questions. At the end of this presentation, please be sure to discuss any questions that you may have with your Housing Choice Voucher Specialist. At this time, you have successfully completed the Housing Choice Voucher briefing and are now ready to seek housing utilizing the subsidy. Thank you for your participation.